Hi, I'm Rachel, compulsive overeater, and it's really lovely to be here. A bit scary to share on step 6. And out of the bit where it says, where you said primarily from AA literature, but I can read you the whole of step 6. And it won't take my whole 15 minutes for those who don't know it. It is, if we can answer to our satisfaction, and this is talking about sharing our step 4 inventory as step 5. We then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us to be willing. So what I thought was actually really this is about willingness, and as that's at the heart of it. And also in our lovely OA literature, which I really like the step 6 bit, OA literature, it talks about willingness. And I also thought it would be interesting to also think a little bit about defects of character and what that really means for me. So just to sort of give you a little bit of history of my defects of character. I think I've always been a compulsive overeater. I can't remember a time when I wasn't. And I can't remember a time when I can't remember a time when I didn't use food to try to deal with my feelings, with the world, with the bewilderment that I felt. So I was driven by these compulsions, but I was also driven increasingly over the years, and I think this is the bit that I was really thinking about in relation to step 6, by a huge amount of self-hate. It was like I lived in shame, that I just thought I was the most worthless, terrible person. And it was a spiral, a vicious circle, because part of the reason that I felt I was so useless and terrible was because I couldn't control my eating. And of course, that lack of control then, continuing to do it just fed into self-hate, all of that, which I think an awful lot of us have known. We desperately want to stop eating, and it's the one thing we can't do. And so to deal with that difficulty, we start eating again, or at least that was how I experienced it. And I experienced that. I also did the yo-yo dieting. So I did lots and lots of mad diets. I would feel okay about myself when I was thin, well, okay-ish. But then I always felt like really, really inauthentic. I remember walking down the street at one point with some clothes that I knew that were quite fitted and had newly bought, and feeling like I had to hold my breath because at any minute I was going to burst out like the Michelin Man, or the Incredible Hulk, because actually somehow my thinness wasn't real, which might sound a little bit weird, but it's almost like, for me, fat and thin were judgments on myself, and they were feelings rather than physical attributes. My thinking was very, very, very strange. But what I thought was that if only I could hate myself enough, if only I could be disgusted and shamed enough for myself, then I would change. I would change. I would find that willpower that it seemed to me that every single other person in the universe had, but I didn't. And so when I was thinking about character defects, also we talk about a spiritual transformation. And I realized that one of the biggest parts of spiritual transformation for me was that actually those have completely gone. And it's not that I never feel guilty about things. I frequently feel guilty about things. I make so many mistakes. I'm a human being. I make about 6,000 mistakes every single day. But what I know now is that doesn't mean that I am a mistake. It means I'm a human being. I think that was one of the reasons I like reading the anonymity tool, the bozo on the bus. It's like, I used to, if you'll excuse my swearing, used to feel like the piece of shit the world spins round. I was actually the lowest of the low, but I ought to be best of the best. And actually, you know what? Ordinary human being with some talents, a number of character defects, it's okay. And so the spirit of step 6, willingness, I needed to be willing to let that go. But before I could do that, it's step 6 for a reason, because you could say, well, why don't we start with step 6? Why don't we start with being willing to why didn't I start with being willing to let go of all these character defects? And I realized, well, the first thing, of course, was to realize that I was absolutely powerless over them. I was powerless over the food, but I'm also powerless over my defects. I'm utterly powerless over how I feel. I'm still powerless over how I feel. There's a saying that I've heard, that I'm not responsible for my first thought. I am responsible for my first action and possibly for my second thought. But what comes into my head, it just comes into my head. And, I'm a human being, keep thinking this. I'm a human being, and so as a human being, I have feelings and I react to them, but it's how what I do with those feelings. And actually, so the first thing I had to realize was that I was powerless over them.
That's 5 minutes.
Thank you. So that was absolutely step one. I mean, it says in our OA literature that step 6 is a bit like doing all the steps on each individual defect. And I can see what it means. So first of all, I had to just accept that I am powerless over my feelings, over how I am. I'm powerless over my past and how that might have impacted me. I can't change that. I have one of the other things that has been amazing about recovery is I've absolutely made peace with it, including in the rooms and having a long history of relapse and recovery. I probably should have said, actually, my current length of abstinence is around 2.5 years, just over 2.5 years. So there's that acceptance has been part of it. But the second thing, the thing that's really, really important is I came into the rooms absolutely kind of despairing of myself and hopeless. And I felt that sometimes, particularly when I've relapsed, that awful despair and hopelessness. But actually, in order for me to become willing, partly it was that despair that drove me into the rooms, but it also, and I'm going to sort of give a little bit of an alert about mentioning suicide, it's also brought me to the brink of suicide as well. So what was the difference between the despair that got me into the rooms and the despair that nearly lost me my life was the hope. And for me, that's the step 2. It was coming to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. I don't have to do this. Something else will do that for me. And there's one bit that I really love in the big book where it talks about this is the point of the book, is to make that relationship with a higher power. Because it's something that I absolutely missed for a long time. I thought that I had to have the higher relationship with the higher power in order to work the steps. And that's absolutely not been my experience. It's been entirely the other way around. And it continues to be like that, actually. There's room for growth. So I found for myself, I couldn't have willingness until I'd done the step 2 and got the hope. Because once I had the hope that there was a higher power that could actually help me with all of this stuff, help me with life, offer me the rule book that I believed I had been born without, and of which I thought I was the only one, and have since discovered by no means am I the only one. In fact, I hear that an awful lot around the rooms, which is very reassuring, actually. I sometimes think, oh, well, I was born without the rule book, but hey, we've got literature. That kind of gives me a really good steer. In terms of kind of getting to that willingness, first of all, I had to have some tiny belief, and it was really, really tiny. There's a bit where I think it's in Bill's story where it says, do you believe, or are you willing to believe? For an awful long time, that was all I had, willingness to believe. So that was where I started. And in fact, that's kind of like starts that road to step 6 and being willing to hand it over. So the step 3, having got just enough belief, and mine really was quite small, my higher power, I've kind of experimented with all sorts of different versions. I've wanted desperately to be a religious person. I'm not. My feeling is that if I saw that burning bush, I would probably put a fire extinguisher out on it. It wouldn't register with me. But you know what? I have a really effective higher power in my life today. And for me, it's about connection. It's about connecting with people. My higher power speaks to me through people, sometimes from the most unexpected sources. Sometimes I go to people who I'm pretty sure will give me some wisdom, a number of whom are here today, I want to say. So thank you for being my God squad. Do you know who you are? You may know who you are. So being able to hand it over, for me, the step 3, handing it over, was kind of obvious once I got step 2. For me, step 2 was always the most difficult one, that coming to believe. I was so self-reliant, so untrusting of myself, of people, of anything. I even got to the stage when I was a child of not even believing that the pavement, I went through quite a mental health crisis when I was young, of seriously believing that the pavement at any moment was going to open up and swallow me and the world was going to change. I felt so insecure. I mean, and as I say, I think no wonder I turned to food. Food was the one thing that was stable and secure, and I knew where I was with it. This nice, lovely inanimate object, and part of the transformation is I know deep in my heart, and because I was willing to let go of it, now I know I can let go of it. And actually, guess what? There is solid ground underneath. Actually, what I believed was completely inaccurate, as it turns out. And there's, as I said, the steps I think are there for a reason. So steps 4 and 5, that was where I started to find out what character defects were. And I've had lots and lots of different ways of expressing it, but it seems to
5
me—
minutes left, Rachel.
Thanks very much. But it seems to me that actually, for me, what character defects, and one of the defects that, thank goodness, has been pretty much removed, comes back occasionally to haunt me, is using language to argue when I don't want to hear something. So I can argue every phrase probably in the big book, but it's completely pointless and very unhelpful. So I'm trying not to do it. And one of the things that I didn't like was defects of character. How dare you say I'm defective? And I recently bought myself a kintsugi bowl, and I don't know if people know what kintsugi is, but it's the Japanese art of mending broken porcelain with gold. And it just occurred to me, so maybe this is one of the reasons why, maybe I was thinking about step 6, that actually this absolutely beautiful item that I have treated myself to. Oh, guess what? I spend my money on stuff that I really like and not on food. That's nice. And it's absolutely beautiful. It has, it's been broken and somebody has mended it really carefully with gold and then decorated with flowers. It's such a lovely object. And I almost see myself as being able to be that object. It's not pretending that I was never broken. It's saying that I can repair, I can be repaired, and that actually that repair is perhaps even more beautiful. Who knows? It's part of me. Those defects are part of me. And the other thing that I had to really realize was that the odd thing about what are my defects doing for me? And it seems incredible, doesn't it, that something like self-hate, which was probably my biggest defect, the one that was causing me the most difficulty and causing me to act out in so many ways, and certainly causing me so often to go to food, that self-hate and that shame, how could they possibly be helping me? But actually, there was a part of me, what I realized, and I think it was steps 4 and 5 that really helped me to start realizing that, was that those defects were the ones that I was using to kind of drive me through life. It's like, if only I can hate myself, if only I can be shamed enough, I will be able to change. And the spiritual transformation is saying, nope, not going to help. In fact, seriously unhelpful. I had to be willing to take that chance. And there's a bit in the step 6 of our OA literature where it says, looks at what our defects are doing for us. And actually, what that was doing for me was kind of giving me a steer. It turned out to be a very wrong steer, actually. It never helped me, actually. Well, no, I say that. To some extent it did, because I survived, if you see what I mean, until I got here. But you know what? I don't need that anymore. And it was making my life utterly miserable, you know, to the point where it's like, oh, the only thing that's nice in life is food. So not true now. Absolutely not true. So becoming willing for me, partly it was a conscious thing about being willing to do what I don't want to do. It was actually really scary to let go of all of those thoughts and all of those ways that I was working that hadn't worked for me. But it was also about the hope that something, that my higher power is going to take it away from me. And honestly, it's funny, even as I'm talking about it, I kind of feel that nerves again. It does feel like leaping off a cliff. And I have a huge amount of vertigo. I'm really, really bad at heights. But it's trusting that there's going to be that safety net. And that for me is what step 6 is. I have to be willing. I don't have to want to do it. Doesn't really matter that I'm scared to do it. Just have to be willing. And that for me was ready enough to be able to then go on to step 7. And actually, at some point, and I can't actually tell you when, but those awful feelings that I drove myself through for my childhood and my young adulthood as well. But they've gone. It wasn't me who removed them. All I had to do was to just be willing and ready. And I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.